Do they help on special teams? Nick said this yesterday in his press conference, talking about something totally different, talking about the back end of the roster. How many times have I said this on the show when we're talking about roster, last guys on the roster? Can you help on special teams?
Right. Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen. A little bit more breaking news yesterday for the Philadelphia Eagles, John. They just keep shaking and baking. How you doing on this Tuesday morning, J-Mac?
Doing well. Evidently, I'm having internet issues again. We had this slow. Well, I don't know, but we had this pocket where I was having issues, and then it was smooth sailing, and now it's popping up again. It drives me nuts. But anyway, not the best way to start the program. But yeah, Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby is here. So Howie never stops. Right at kickoff of Monday Night Football. So Howie's not paying attention.
I want everybody to settle in. Let's get into the Tank Bigsby conversation. There's a couple different ways to look at it. All right. I think we're going to look at it from the addition of the team and the positives, and I think we can ask the elephant in the room type of questions about Howie Roseman and the Eagles offseason that I think many are thinking and maybe are afraid to talk about. We will talk about them here on Birds 365. John, let's start with the good, or let's start with why we think they acquired Tank Bigsby. They sent a 5th and a 6th round pick yesterday in the evening for Tank Bigsby from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had almost, I think, 800 yards or 700 something yards last year in 16 games as a running back for them, 7 touchdowns. He had 6 kick returns for about 190 plus yards. And now he's on his way to Philadelphia in a running back room that has Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, and A.J. Dillon. John, your first thoughts on the acquisition of Tank Bigsby for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, I said yesterday, and I'm already angry, as you know, pre-show, but, I gotta, how do I frame this properly? I'm not pulling kick returner out of my ass because he had 6 kick returns in Jacksonville. Obviously, and you could look at your favorite Eagles beat writer, whoever you like, and you're going to see similar things to what I said on the show last night. And what I wrote about on Twitter, what I'll write about today as a whole, after I get to talk to today's coordinator day. So we'll get to talk to Kevin Patullo. But, it's not, I get it. Yeah, you guys blame the Eagles. All right. If you don't like why they got the kid, if you don't like Will Shipley, if you don't like A.J. Dillon, blame the Eagles. Blame your favorite team. I'm just telling you their mindset behind why they made this deal. And, kick returns were up 70% across the league. They think he can be an impactful potential returner. Can he help at running back? If Will Shipley's out a couple weeks, sure, maybe. But he's not here to replace Will Shipley. Long term, it's probably a good, get somebody that young on a cost-effective deal that factors into it. And you can envision next year and say, maybe A.J. Dillon's not here if he has a good year. And you could say you have a better backup spot. But, he's not here to replace Will Shipley. And everything's about evaluation. And it's not about my evaluation. Again, he had 6 kickoff returns. He was very effective at them. But there's 6 kickoff returns. Trust me. I wouldn't even be mentioning kickoff returns if you were just asking me about the trade acquisition. Right. And that's one of the things when you contact me, we do these immediacy is I say I'm gathering information. I'm trying to figure out why they did this. So again, you can go, I always say, you don't have to listen to me. You can go around to your favorite Eagles beat writer. You'll see similar wording. Don't blame the messenger.
So what's the outlook then in your estimation on the running back room? Do you think they keep all 4? Like if Will Shipley's back?
Yeah, well, that's another.
You think they dress all 4 on game day? How do you see that part of it playing out?
when Will's back, yes. And people say, well, you can't dress for it. They did dress for running backs. They just had a fullback. They just did it. And by the way, Ben Van Sumeren was part of the plan for kickoff returns, right, which people did not know. They already did it. Just now you have a running back instead of a fullback. You have to have a fullback. No, you don't. No, you don't. Do they help on special teams? Nick said this yesterday in his press conference, talking about something totally different, talking about the back end of the roster. Do you help on special teams? How many times have I said this on the show when we're talking about roster, last guys on the roster? Can you help on special teams?
Right.
So, obviously,
feels to me like, John, like Tank Bigsby is a better running back than A.J. Dillon. And maybe even you could make the argument he's better than Will Shipley. Now, Will Shipley is a young player who doesn't have a lot of experience in the NFL just yet, and maybe he does amount to a better player. But Tank Bigsby had a pretty good year last year for a sophomore player in Jacksonville. That's why I'm not saying you're wrong. That's why when they made the move, though, my mind didn't go right there. It went to another running back. And, we've talked about the way the Eagles offense has become so pass first or so run first, and it relies on Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. And, part of me wondered, are they doubling down and making that a triple threat? You don't think that's what they're trying to do here at all, right? Straight kick return.
Again, Will might miss a week or two. And then it'll be Saquon and AJ who just got here, but and he might be forced into some action. And if you're forced into some action and do some things, who knows? But again, be very wary of numbers on bad football teams. And remember nobody looks at the other side. Like Jacksonville's still a bad football team. They did a nice job against an even worse football team in week 1, but they didn't want them. Now it's a new regime, new GM, new head coach. Bottom line is, wasn't that good because they haven't been in the building. They didn't want them. Now, again,
that's no guarantee every GM is making the right decision on stuff like that.
No, I'm just saying though, people need to look at it from the other side as well. So for people saying he's clearly better than so and so, insert name. Look, I'm just telling you what the Eagles think. If you ask me what I think, I don't know enough about Tank Bigsby. I know he's got a better draft pedigree, so I know how people are, and they're going to lean on that.
He's a hard runner, man. I do like him. I liked the player last year when he was running with the Jags. Now, I didn't watch too much of him, but I do remember the kickoff return he had versus the Eagles, John, last year. Remember that? He ran Nolan Smith over.
That's one of the things, and maybe the Eagles get too bogged down in that kind of stuff because they see something for a very short something, they say, whoa.
Yeah, right.
But look, from the standpoint of kickoffs are a big deal in the NFL now. And by the way, that is my favorite thing about the early NFL.
Yeah, I agree.
Kickoff return is back. I mean, it is meaningful. And you can win and lose games not only by your kickoff returns, but your kickoff coverage. It is back. And I love that. And it is now, nobody gave a shit when everybody was kicking touchbacks and throwing it out of the end zone and just, there were 20% return rates. Now you're up over 70%. And teams like Minnesota did it last night. They were so shitty at kickoff coverage that they just started kicking it in the end zone and letting them have it at the 35. Like that ain't helping you.
Yeah.
But bad. If you can't do it, if you can't cover, it's going to have a big impact. And then they won the game on a kickoff return by doing the right thing because of the timing, and Chicago burned their timeouts. And there was 2:02 left when Chicago scored. They only had one timeout. So Chicago wanted to kick the ball out of the end zone. So you have 2 timeouts. You have the 2-minute warning, and then you have 1 timeout after the 2-minute warning. Then they would have had about a minute and to go tie the game, legitimate shot, or even win it. with that much time. But they brought it out from 7 yards deep. Didn't matter where he got to. It was a decent return, but that didn't matter. It was just about wasting the time. Then they had one timeout. You ran it all the way down to like 16 seconds, game over. Kick returns are going to have a big impact. So it makes sense from the Eagles' perspective of they want to get good at that, both ends of it. Kickoff returns and kickoff coverage. And if
that sounds
helps them,
to me. That sounds
yes,
that makes sense.
It's very Eaglesy.
Right.
It's very Eaglesy.
Emerging in the NFL as a more prominent part of the game, and the Eagles want to get way ahead of it, want to spend more than other teams to, get good at it quick and try and win on the margins that way. Is a 5th and a 6th rich for a kick returner still with the setup that they have now?
Well, I don't think it is now. Before, yeah.
Yeah, well, you brought the context last night, John, when you're like, dude, did you see how many trades they make on day 3 of the draft each year? Like they can get 5th and 6th round picks. I'm not worried about that.
And plus, you see it this year already. Everybody's hyped, and you saw it last year. Everybody was hyped about the day 3 picks. Trevor Keegan, could he be a day 1 start? He's in Dallas now after he got waived. Cam Williams, what an upside. He's inactive. Drew Kendall is inactive. Kyle McCord's cutting on the practice squad. Miles Hinton's on injured reserve. APR's cut. They're giving out his number to Zadarius Smith already. That's how quickly they move on in the NFL. Who's here? Smile Munden as a special teams player and Mac McWilliams as a special teams player. From all those day 3 picks, those are the guys contributing. If you can get something meaningful for a 5th, 6th, but package them together. And again, long term, he'll be in the backup situation if you think about next year because he's under contract.
Right.
He's got 1 more year after this year. So that factors into it as well. He's very cost effective. And look, maybe he is better. I'm just telling you what they think. Now, if you want to ask me what I think, I got to see him play first. But I'm not going to be enamored by numbers in Jacksonville. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah.
That's not all that meaningful to me. From the standpoint, I'm not going to hold that against him either. It's a bad organization. It's been a bad organization. Hopefully they're doing some right things now. Hopefully they can turn it around. But yeah, I have to see him play first. I'm not going to rely on Twitter scouts from Auburn tape. So, maybe he's an upgrade, but they look when they traded for Kenny Pickett, there was a lot of assumptions that, they don't like Tanner McKee. And they made it very clear that they liked Tanner McKee. Like maybe wasn't ready, but they made it very clear that long term they like Tanner McKee. And obviously that was borne out and very successful, by the way, because Kenny did a good job as a backup quarterback last year, whether people give him credit for that or not. He did a good job, played very well in that Washington game. Washington won that game with 6 seconds left. Jalen left with 6 minutes after 6 minutes into the game, and Washington needed till 6 seconds left to win that game. He did a very good job overall as a backup quarterback. And then he hurt his ribs and persevered the next week and won that game. Did a very good job as a backup quarterback. But long term, the Eagles wanted to go where they wanted to go with Tanner McKee. They wanted another year. They got it. And now he's the backup quarterback, unfortunately injured, but he's the backup quarterback. Now, so what I'm saying is when they push back on stuff, and they made it very clear, very, very clear, it's not about Will Shipley.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see how much of an impact he makes. I think he's gonna. I do think he's definitely an improvement for kick returns, if that's explicitly what he's for. I'd like to see how his role kind of evolves on the team, if at all. But I do think he's worth more than just a kick returner. While I do hear you, and I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm sure they will use him on kick returns. I happen to think he has the ability to impact the team more than just that.
Oh,
kick
that's
return.
fine. I have nobody. If you all have your personal evaluations, that's fine. I have no issue with that. I'm just trying to impart what the team thinks, and what I think will, unfold over the coming weeks when I get to see him play.
Why did you say you don't really care for his stats in Jacksonville?
Well, because A, it's a very bad team. B, they drafted a kid. So the guys who came in, now again, they're unproven. New GM, new head coach. They didn't want him. He was, he had those numbers. They have access to all the film, to say the least, and he went in a different direction. So it's not like they went, oh, we don't need a backup running back. Obviously, Travis Etienne's a very good player. They're running back one. So he was more in the line for the backup role. But they drafted a kid, and I forget his name. He's got a weird name. Really fast kid. I'd have to look it up. But they went a different direction. So, if you just look at the numbers and say, all right, 766 yards. That's pretty good for a backup running. Obviously, injury
in Jacksonville with a pretty shoddy O-line,
Yeah, but again, they had a chance to keep him.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to gauge because and I don't mean I'm not trying to push back on you. I'm just saying you always tell me about how I can't use good or bad teams to judge players, which I think is very fair.
Well, that's
so I'm trying to warn you, all right, Tank had pretty good production on a really shitty team.
Well,
is he a better player in a better team, or are the stats kind of fake news? I don't know.
Well, that stats are always fake news. Number one. So when I say, because now they're not always fake news if you look at the context and you dive into the context. That's what I'm saying. But again, very few people, and I brought this up about the college level. If things were flipped with Texas, I forget who they played this week. Anybody know? Put it in the chat. But Arch Manning had 5, 6. I forget who they played.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up.
Now, if they flipped that and they played that team week 1,
San Jose
State. If they played that team week 1 and then they got to Ohio State week 2, the hype coming into that game for Arch Manning would have been insane, and people would have been wondering why. Oh, he threw 5, 6 touchdowns, whatever he threw. Why can't he do that against Ohio State? And it's much more pronounced at the college level when you have these tremendous different levels of competition.
Yeah, right.
But in the NFL, it's also, you'll see as you get to the second half of the season when some of these teams start tapping out, and you'll see even the best players, even the guys, the all-pro players, they'll ring up stats against these bad teams, and then you'll get in the muck against a good team, and it'll look pretty shitty, even if you win and persevere like the Eagles often do. But statistically, it won't look great. So you really have to dive deep in those situations. Are they meaningful minutes? A lot of people talk about garbage time in the NBA. There's a lot of garbage time in the NFL. Are they meaningful statistics? Is it a one-score game, or going back and forth? Or you're Josh Allen pulling wins out of your what? That's impactful. I still say today, Buffalo did not play well as a whole. So there's a lot of ball spreads. Same thing last night, the 2 night games. Minnesota did not play well, but they pulled it out of their ass at the end of the game against a bad football team. And that everybody's happy. They did not play well. There were a lot of bad signs for J.J. McCarthy. On the other hand, Josh Allen, unbelievable. It carried his team to a victory. A team that played very poorly for most of that game overall. But if you win, and if you win because great players make great plays, or you win because you're facing a bad team, whatever it might be. I was looking, let's see, at the PFF rankings. They haven't gotten last night's game. It's too early. So we're talking about 30 teams, which Minnesota and Chicago, neither of them played well. So they're not going to be at the top of the list.
No, we'll talk about that game a little bit once we wrap up Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, but I'm just, so the Eagles were number 9, by the way, top in the top 10. But I just wanted to look. Baltimore was number 4. Buffalo, I'm still looking. Buffalo was 14. Not terrible. I thought they'd be worse. They didn't play well. Their quarterback just was a magician.
He was, man. Josh Allen's a special player.
At the end of the game. And John Harbaugh made a bunch of mistakes. That's one of the things that PFF should do. They should come up with some kind of coaching metric.
I know. I agree with you on that.
But so, the team that played better lost the game. Bottom line. The team that played better last night lost the game. Bottom line. Overall, through the 60 minutes. And not that they played well, but they lost the game. Happens all the time in the NFL. So you got to, as Nick Sirianni would say, it's boring, but you got to pay attention to, when you're talking about statistics, if you want to talk about them with any relevancy, you gotta really break them down and see what they mean. And I haven't done that with Tank Bigsby. But what I do know is Jacksonville didn't want him, and that hedges back to long before trading him. He was not, the backup running back this year. Now, again, unproven coach, unproven GM. Maybe they're wrong. But, I'm not going to get too excited about numbers in Jacksonville. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, understandable.
Long-winded way to say it.
John, a couple other things I want to talk about here, and there's 2 things that I think people aren't going to love, but we'll talk about them. 2 of them are elephants in the room, in my estimation. I'll start with the one that's a little bit more tempered, and people won't get as upset about, and then I'll ask the questions that I think people are going to get a little mad at me for, but that's all right. I'll ask them anyway. The first elephant in the room, John, is the Eagles need help on defense. And everybody was hoping that they'd be trading for a corner or an edge rusher, but I think they added Zadarius, so I think you are better at that spot. But, a lot of people in the comments, John, where's cornerback 2? Where's cornerback 2? Where's cornerback 2? Why are we trading for a running back? What do you think of that as they continue to make moves on the offense, really for a team that I don't think needs that much help on the offense? But what do you think of kind of that and all the fans looking for a cornerback 2?
Well, they already made their move at cornerback. Not to say they can't, if things continue to go poorly, they can't shift gears, but they made their move with Ja'Cory and Bennett. Now it was interesting because there's a lot of hype about Mike Hilton coming in. He's a slot corner. And it turns out the Eagles worked out a bunch of guys yesterday, including Quez Watkins, by the way. So again, so they brought in, this is what teams do for people that don't know. During the weeks, not every week, but a lot of weeks, and especially early in the season, you bring in a bunch of guys on the street to build up sort of personnel dossiers on where they are in case of injuries. So, they brought in Mike Hilton. They brought in Quez Watkins. They brought in Jamin Davis, first-round pick in Washington a couple of years ago. Never panned out. Isaiah Foskey, we talked about last week, was going to be coming in. He was a second-round pick in 2023. A couple offensive linemen. KJ Osborne, who had a couple good seasons as a third receiver. They brought in all these guys yesterday to build up sort of those dossiers in case people get injured down the road. And the Hilton one was interesting because he's a slot corner, and you can envision, well, maybe if they like Mike Hilton, maybe if he's as a Darius Smith level, they could bring him in to play the slot because they don't have any confidence in them playing the slot. And then kick Cooper outside, and then you solve the cornerback 2 issue. That even I mulled that over, but if you heard us talking to Nick yesterday, it didn't sound like that was happening. Now, ultimately, and we'll talk about it with Vic today, I'm sure. But from the way Nick Sirianni was talking, it did not sound like that was the plan. And I'll try to pull it up as I'm speaking here about his actual words on Cooper. But so, he talked about his versatility. He can return punts, blah, 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 play inside, outside, play safety. I'm sure he'd be pretty good on offense if we say, hey, let's put him on offense. By the way, a number of people, he played 3 snaps on offense, and a lot of people were losing their minds. He's new. Travis Hunter was victory formation. Settle down. They do that. Last year it was Reed. This year, evidently it's going to be Cooper. But, he does a lot of things really well, which we all know. But then as he continued, he said, I think right now he's one of the best nickels in the NFL with the way he plays these football games, with his physicality, with his ability to match routes, with his ability to use his mind and think of how routes are coming at him. I just think he can do a lot of things there. Again, flexibility to be able to move him around. We'll see what we do, but I do believe that he is one of the better players at his position in the NFL. Now, that sounds to me like he doesn't want to move him. And he is one of the better players at his position in the NFL, arguably the best nickel corner in the NFL. Now, if he goes outside, is he one of the best outside cornerbacks in the NFL? Probably not right away.
Yeah, definitely not.
So, but I've also brought up since the beginning, there's a business part of this as well. We have to get him outside at some point. So maybe you pull the trigger. A lot of ways it can go.
Or is it vice versa, John? Is it the Eagles don't want to put him outside because it's going to cost another $60 million?
Well, that's part of the. That's what makes it so difficult, because I guarantee his agent will say that.
Yeah.
He's trying to limit his earning power. And that's part of the business of football nobody wants to talk about, but exists. So all of that factors into it. But certainly from Nick Sirianni's words, and hey, he's the head coach, so people can make fun of him all they want, and Vic is in charge of the defense, and what Vic says goes, and if Vic wants to move him, he'll move. But those guys are generally on the same page. And you saw Vic defer to Nick Sirianni earlier when he was talking about the starters. He wouldn't give up anything. So all this, Nick controls the team. So, and his words were pretty definitive.
They got him for sure. All right, Johnny Mac. Now, my next elephant in the room that I don't think people are going to be happy with, but I do have to ask it. Now, I'll be clear. I don't really feel this way, but I got this text last night, and I think it's fair for some to wonder this, especially people who might not be as, who follow the Eagles as closely. But this is the text I got last night, all right? And I'll read it to you verbatim as it was texted to me. I've never seen the Eagles make so many trades at this time. Bad job by Howie in the offseason. He may have won the draft perhaps, but he butchered the management of the roster. And I think where they're right is this is a lot of moves, John, that Howie, I think he's made 6 or 7 moves in the last, 2-3 weeks before the start of the season and into the start of the season. He obviously signs Darius Smith. Now you make a trade for Tanks Bigsby. Do you think that's a fair comment? And how do you see how Howie managed the offseason? Because I will say he is a little bit more reactive right now. He's signing a lot of or trading for players, doing different things right now, trying to plug holes. What do you think of that comment? And what do you think of Howie's offseason as it looks?
I've mentioned this a few times, and I got shit on for it
Yeah,
earlier.
well, that's why I said we're going to get shit on for it.
Far early in the process, and even Cilio brought it up on our pregame show, and I talked about it there. Look, there's two ways you can look at it. First of all, what I talked about, it's easier to make trades now. So you have to also have that in the back of your mind. Young GMs, Howie just did it again. He's done it a couple times with Jacksonville. First year GM, younger guy, first year head coach, more willing to move. The new breed of GMs are more willing to trade. So that factors into it.
Yeah, I agree.
The second part is, yes, you can say the 90-man roster was not nearly as deep as we all thought it was, including myself. And actions speak louder than words. Now, the positive from the Eagles standpoint, what one of Howie's great strengths as a GM, he doesn't sit on mistakes. He tries to correct them as quickly as possible. Whether you're talking about Bryce Huff, most teams, and that's why you say, and I speak from conventional wisdom a lot of times with old school GMs, they wouldn't have traded Bryce Huff. They wouldn't have even considered it.
Right.
They would have sat on it, went through the misery for another year, and then moved on. So he's much more proactive. So to me, that's a positive. So again, you're talking about very margin type deals, whether it's John Mechie. I think the Eagles are better than they've ever been at backup receiver in the Nick Sirianni era with Jahan Dotson and John Mechie. He gave up Harrison Bryant. Who cares? No offense, JD. Backup quarterback, which they needed from the standpoint of, unfortunately, Tanner fractured his thumb, and he'll be out for probably another week or two, but should be back by week 4 at the worst. So they went out and got Sam Howell and a 6, and they give up a 5 and a 7. Would you be more comfortable if Jalen Hurts got knocked out with Sam Howell or Kyle McCord or Dorian Thompson-Robinson? I mean,
yeah, right.
You got, I'm not a big Sam Howell guy, but you got better increment, and ultimately he'll be the third string quarterback, and you're much better if the catastrophe happens, which anybody's screwed, but you'll be much better to have him as a third string quarterback. But certainly as a guy who has to come in, much more better equipped to play right now than Kyle McCord or Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think everybody would agree with that.
I certainly agree. And I agree from the sentiment of I like that he doesn't sit on his hands.
Fred Johnson, you get him for a 7th-round pick. You got your swing tackle back. You've already seen Fred Johnson play 4 or 5 games. 5 games he started last year. 5 games. And the Eagles won all of them. Well, they won every game, but so they persevered. That's all you're looking for with a swing tackle. They moved out. Darren Kennard actually played pretty well. Had to play for Green Bay. Had to play pretty well. They got back a 7th. He wasn't going to make the team. So, all right, get an extra pick. They could do more things. Then they give up a 5 and a 6 for Tank Bigsby. And like I said, whether you agree with their thought process or not, and for whatever reason, a lot of Eagles fans don't seem to like Will Shipley. I don't know why. I'm very concerned he got hurt in the first game, but he was pretty damn good before he got hurt.
Look, I was critical of him in the offseason. He looked really good in week 1. I thought he was a great change of pace from Saquon.
Great receiver. I hope
great receiver.
Visions for him. And they get Bigsby to elevate the kickoff return game, which I think is very Eaglesy. It is more important. It is more important. In years past, you didn't even give a shit who the kick returner was because it didn't matter. Now it matters. And I don't know if he can do it, but they think he can do it.
Right.
And as you mentioned, he had a good kick return. Sometimes I think they lean a little bit too much to players. Like one of the reasons they liked Ojulari is that he played well against them. I'd say maybe look at him against some other teams, but because he hasn't been great to this point. But Nick spoke well of him, which I'm surprised. It's going to help us win games or something at some point. Mentioned about him, so no guarantee they'll be right, but I think the mindset behind it makes a lot of sense. So it depends. To your original question, it depends how you look at it. Yes, if your goal is to build up the best 90-man roster, well, their actions speak that they weren't competent in the guys that were going to be in those positions that we just went down. All right, so what? They got better.
Right.
That's go. Now you have more avenues. Again, years ago, 10, we're not even talking about 20, 30 years ago. It's very hard to make these trades. So the assumption, yes, the Eagles have done more than they've ever done. But part of that is just it's easier to do things. And people are in other cities are more willing to do things. So, and that was not always the case in the past. But yeah, I think one of Howie's greatest strengths as a GM is moving on from guys who aren't hitting their evaluation points, shall we say, and I think this is evidence of it. They got better at wide receiver. They got better at backup quarterback. They got better on the backup offensive line. And now they have a guy, they got better at kick returner in theory. And who knows, maybe he can help at running back as well.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, last question on this topic here with
Darius Smith. I didn't bring him up. They got better at edge rusher as well.
Yep, no doubt. John, the one thing Howie does like to do, all right, we had news this weekend that Howie tried a 2 first, a 3, a 5, and others. Now, we don't know exactly what others means. Some say Jordan Davis because, Jerry wanted a run stopper. That's a lot to be willing to trade. Now, I know Micah Parsons is a player that they have well above their demarcation line of guys that they would pay. But that tells me if the right guy is available, they're willing to pay. I'm wondering if they're warming up James Gladstone a little bit, letting them get a couple good trades with Howie. Doesn't think, all right, man, Howie are making good trades. I'm winning. I'm getting draft picks for the guys I don't want. If Trayvon Walker did become available, you got to think Howie's told him, hey, you don't make a move until you call me and I will beat that offer. That's what I think. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, no, I know, people love this hot stove mentality of baseball. I think they made their moves at cornerback. That's why I didn't mention Jacory. You should throw him in there. Well, outside cornerback and edge rusher. Now, if those guys fail, then again, it opens up around the trade deadline. But I think they made their move at edge rusher. They tried. They tried for the home run. Sorry, losing my voice, but weren't able to hit it with Micah. They tried other things. Maybe Trayvon Walker was part of that process, but now they've made the move and they're going to see how it works out. And I think the same thing with Jacory and Bennett. They made the move. We'll see how things work out. It's interesting to me how quickly people bail on, like what has Jacory and Bennett done other than maybe get a 50-50 DPI? Maybe it was interference, maybe it wasn't, but yeah, I'm not going to blame it on him. Got here August 5th. He's got upside, played okay in limited snaps with the Raiders. But for some reason, nobody wants to give him a chance. I don't get it. Maybe it turns out to be nothing. Maybe it's not good enough. That's possible. I just don't understand people making that evaluation so quickly. He's the first guy in there when Adoree was getting checked for a concussion. I think they're going to get to him eventually as he continues to. Remember, very complicated defense. Not as easy as just, say a pass rusher coming in. You can point at Zadarius Smith, who's a veteran player, and would be easier from that perspective anyway. And has done it for a long time at a high level in this league. But, even as a pass rusher in general, you can point at them and say, go get the quarterback. And you might want to do some more things, especially Vic, with dropping guys and things like that. And you'll work up to that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can just say, go get the quarterback. It's very simple. So it's a lot harder, especially in this defense, to jump on the field as a corner. And you saw it last year with Cooper, and he made a big deal about missing 20 days of camp. Now that's a sliding scale as well, because this year they wanted to get to Drew, and despite some injuries, they got to Drew Makuba because they wanted him on the field. Last year they had Avonte Maddox, which people could say, well, but he was a veteran player who knew how to play.
Right.
Similar to, sound familiar? That's a Dory Jackson.
Right.
Veteran player who knows how to play. Eventually, they're going to get to the guy with upside.
We'll see how it shakes out. Johnny Mac, great stuff there. The Eagles have acquired Tank Bigsby. Let's see what he can do, everybody. I do look, if the kick returns become a thing, good. Get good at it.
Oh, they're a thing, man. They're already a thing.
I know they're a thing, so that's a good thing for the Eagles.